You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing with your host, Connor Byrne.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Don't forget to rate or review this episode wherever you are listening or watching. It really helps us reach and build on this amazing, engaged community of marketers just like you. And if you're interested in getting involved with That's What I Call Marketing, our sponsorship kit is available on our website, that'swhatIcallmarketing.com/sponsor. Get in touch with us and we can work together on creating a series of content that works for you and your brand. Well, I read a quote from Peter Field that said, any brand with ambitions beyond its budget needs to see this. Well, I needed to find out what he was referring to. And in this instance, he was referring to Bountiful Cows IPA study, which analysed 256 ad campaigns, examining them for relative advantage. I tracked down Adam Foley, CEO of Bountiful Cow, to ask him more about the analysis and the findings. The research argues that relative advantage campaigns are 15% more likely to show at least one very large brand effect. They are also 60% more likely to have a very large effect on awareness, 22% more likely on differentiation, suggesting a longer term benefit to the brand and the business. As Adam himself has said, when you can't outspend your competition, you have to outthink them. You'll never win by doing the same thing with less money. It's about seizing opportunities that competitors overlook or neglect. This episode delves into the report with great real-life examples of brands that are using the principles of relative advantage. We cover the importance of challenger brands, how diverse and non-traditional approach to marketing and audience engagement can result in significant company growth and brand awareness. We talk about leveraging social currency and the critical role of measuring campaign effectiveness. So let's get into this episode all about challenging the way we think about growth. And we'll get into that just after a word from our sponsors.
Today's show is supported by the Indie List, the leader in providing you with easy access to hundreds of highly experienced marketers quickly and cost effectively. Visit theindielist.ie to speak to the Indie List team today.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Adam, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Connor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, listen, I'd love to get a bit about your background, kind of your origin story. Can you tell me about your background? Because it's going to be just interesting kind of to where you've landed now and kind of why you're doing what you're doing.
Of course, God. Well, how far back do you want to go?
School.
School? Do you really? You want to go back to school?
The linear or non-linear path you've had.
Okay. Well, so in terms of my career, I suppose, it was kind of a bit, you must get this a lot, but it was all a bit of a mistake. There was no real plan. But I remember I was at Glastonbury, I think it was in 1999, and Sunday morning. And a lot of things can happen at Glastonbury on Sunday morning. And I thought, oh God, I should get a job. I just finished university and I didn't have anything lined up. And I left the festival at some point, and I went to Castle Carey train station, which if you've been to Glastonbury, you'll know. And the train west goes home to Devon, where I'm from, and the train east goes to London. And I thought, well, I should go to London and get a job. So I did that. I went to London and I got a suit. And then on Tuesday, I was in some kind of like weird kind of group interview situation for a post selling classified advertising for Food Manufacture magazine, and also manufacturing chemist and inside cosmetics, because it was kind of a little group. So I got the job, and I got a business card that said Food and Fine Chemicals Department. And then I went home to Devon on the Friday and said, I'm moving to London. I've got a job. I think I was home for about half an hour between university and leaving home. And then for one reason or another, it didn't work out. I did okay, but I don't think it was my true calling. And I got to around Christmas time, that year. So I'd been there for about 3 or 4 months, and I was living in Paddington, and I used to walk past a pub called the Dudley Arms quite a lot, and there was on the corner I saw something called Zenith Media, and I thought, well, I should just work there. And then so I spoke to a recruitment consultant, and they said, well, there is a job in the regional press department. Do you want to go for that? I just thought, well, yeah, okay. Naively, I thought I'd be home in time every day for Neighbours if I worked there, but that's not quite how media agencies work, it turns out. Anyway, so I got the job, and there I was and that's when my sort of media career proper started.
That is dead. I have heard some definitely non-linear paths to career, but I'm going to give you the most random, like, sliding doors moment. What happened if you'd gone on the Devon train?
Well, there you go. Know. Yeah. Well, I could have gone back to my job at Burger King where I used to work. So yeah.
Who was headlining in Glastonbury? Do you remember?
That's a good question, actually. I think it was REM, but I didn't see them. Manic Street Preachers, but I didn't see them. And someone else that I didn't see. It was one of those ones where you just go and do other things.
Good times.
Yeah.
So from there, obviously, yeah, and I love the ambition to get home and watch Neighbours.
Failed.
It's still a great show. But so from there, you continued on in media agencies. I'd love to hear the kind of the story about kind of you getting to that point.
Yeah. So what happened was that I started working in regional press, and this is a kind of theme, I suppose, that goes through my sort of personal life and my professional life, is that I quickly realised that not many people wanted to work in the regional press team. It was kind of there was a phrase that went around the agency going, "Don't break bread with regional press," So that just made me wanted to do it more, and I got really passionate about it and started to. It's like everyone has got a picture of themselves in the local newspaper. And it's like it's where all the stories are told about real people and things that really matter to people that aren't really reported on elsewhere. And there was stuff like it sounds like a really trite thing to say, but everything has to happen somewhere. So often local papers would break the biggest stories. So the Harold Shipman story was broken by the Manchester Evening News because they were the first people to start to pick up on it. So I started to realise how important it was and how kind of vital a tool of democracy, and that kind of made me. I don't know, just become. It gave me a sort of purpose in my early career, I suppose, and I was really driven to promote it to our clients, and that got me really close to BT, who were the biggest press advertiser in the UK at that time, and I was working on their business, and then they pitched it, and it ended up moving to an agency called Starcom, which I'm ashamed to say I hadn't heard of when we lost the business. And it was a bit like, because at the time Zenith was like this, you used to get booed at pub quizzes because Zenith was like the Death Star because it was the biggest agency and it didn't really have any competition. So this is like 99, 2000. So when Zenith started to lose business to companies like Mediacom and Starcom, it was a bit like, how is this happening? But then BT got in touch and said that they would like Starcom to take me over with the business, and so I went and sort of set up a regional press department, which they didn't have at Starcom, across Starcom and Mediavest, the two agencies. Mediavest had a regional press department and Starcom didn't, so I kind of worked on putting those two things together, and then eventually became sort of moved into more of a planning role on BT more generally, and then from there I started to get into the strategy world. So we won a couple of music clients, EMI Music, and I was kind of a natural fit for it in that I knew a bit about music and a bit about media, but nothing about strategy. So I sort of made it up as I went along. And there was kind of, I guess it was a really big moment for me on that, because I had a sort of a big moment of failure where and it's funny in retrospect, but because I probably didn't know entirely what I was doing at that point, but I kind of had an inkling. The Terra Firma were a kind of private equity company that bought EMI, and we ended up in a position where we lost the planning and the strategy to 7 Stars, which is the group I work for now. And it was a moment, a kind of real low in my career. That's something I was so passionate about and cared so much about, but had failed in some way professionally. Kind of really was a moment where I got my shit together, I guess. And at that moment, I was kind of determined to really prove that I could do it. And then about 18 months later, we got back onto the account, and and from there I started to build my position as a strategist within the agency.
Amazing! It's just when you're naming all the agencies, I'd love to know who comes up with them, makes them sound like something out of Battlestar Galactica. Zenith, Starcom. It's like.
I always thought MediaVest was a weird name, and it took me ages to realise it was to do with investment rather than a sort of item of clothing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm still not quite sure what a MediaVest looks like.
What's that song from The Simpsons? Anyway, there's a Simpsons song.
Oh God! Yeah, I know the one you mean.
So your focus now is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but is kind of in the area of challenger brands. That's where you kind of are investing your time. I'd love to know what got you into that. What was it about that? Because it's quite, I guess it's a niche in a way. Like, what is it that you found interesting, and the gap, I guess, as well, that you identified?
Okay, so it is a bit of a non-linear path, and you did ask me about school, so I'm gonna use that. So. When I was at school, and it's like the early, when you go into like big schools, so like 11 onwards, and I sort of stopped. I was doing okay at the school before that, but I sort of lost focus a little bit, as you tend to do, and become interested in stuff outside school, like skateboarding and smoking and whatever, and. I was sort of drifting a bit, and then I was in this English class, and we had this teacher called Mr. Finn. The way he'd set you these like homework by writing the title of a story he wanted you to write on the blackboard, and he wrote on there, "No one knows what my teachers really like, but I do because I'm their son." And we all had to go away and write a story about that, and everyone wrote a story which was how this teacher who everyone hated at school was this absolute sweetheart when you got home, apart from me. And I wrote a story about how there was this like teacher who everyone loved at school, but at home was kind of modelled more on the lines of sort of Genghis Khan or something. And I got called to the front of the class, and I thought I was in trouble because I'd done it differently. And actually the teacher said, this is a really good lesson where if you figure out what everyone else is doing and you do the opposite, you'll get more noticed. And actually, I think I started to take that all the way through everything I did, and to varying degrees of success in my sort of like haircuts and hairstyles and things, all of which taught me some pretty useful lessons about running and hiding, which is, again, very good advice for early 2000s media agencies. But it also taught me that if you do things differently, then it's easier to kind of stand out. It's easier to get noticed, I guess. And that, I suppose, if you think about the regional press, my career, and that's the same thing, really. It's like, if you find something that other people aren't really doing and kind of try and make a name for yourself there, you can do. So when I went to Starcom, because Starcom kind of grew out of Motive, which was the media department of BBH. So in our reception, we had the famous Levi's Black Sheep. And I sort of took it as my personal instruction every day to go in there and try and find out what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. So it kind of fitted with my personality. And I always swore that if I ever ended up sort of running an agency, that would be the approach I'd want to take. So when I got to Bountiful Cow, which is is run by the Seven Stars Group, or owned by the Seven Stars Group, that was very much the kind of thinking as soon as we came in, because we are a challenger business by dint of our size and our capability, but the type of clients we work with as well. So we wanted to make sure that we had a kind of challenger philosophy running through everything we did.
It's so funny that you mentioned, I didn't know obviously the BBH connection, but as you were talking, all I was thinking about was the zig and zag of BBH. And that's fascinating. That's kind of how you really connected to that and kind of finding a different path to do. And again, the regional press is very interesting in that, like that kind of speaks to that. So challenger brands, how are you defining a challenger brand?
It's a really good question, because there are lots of ways in which you can be a challenger now. Because I guess the way what we wanted to do was, when you look at a lot of the rules that are written nowadays for brands, and you think about things like Byron Sharp, which are incredibly valuable and important, but the the rules that are kind of laid out aren't always available to challengers. They can be flawed for challengers because they often tend to highlight the advantages of being large in the first place, not necessarily how to grow. So it's been widely shown and proved, and we're not disputing that this is true, but a disproportionately higher excess share of voice is required to grow. I guess while we're not disputing that, the question we are asking is, what do you do if you can't do that, or you haven't got the money to do that? Yeah. So, or at least, are there other ways to think about achieving excess share of voice beyond just spending more? And there was this great quote by Philippe Thomas, which just says, if everyone has got the same strategy, then no one can win, especially when your pockets aren't as deep as others. So the challenges our clients face are different in every category, and it doesn't have to be about necessarily size. It can be about kind of trying to redefine a category that's outlived its course, or that you've outgrown. So we think about our clients' challenges in different ways, and we've created this proposition we think can help us address that.
So they can be any size. It could be, it could be an older brand that's trying to re-establish itself, has lost its way a bit. So it's not necessarily to do with new to market necessarily, but you probably have a mix of that as well.
Yeah, exactly that.
Why, you kind of touched on it there a bit, but in terms of the need to behave differently in media, why do challenger brands, from your experience, need to behave differently in media? Probably some of it is to do with budget. I get that, but if they're maybe a larger brand and they're kind of trying to redefine themselves and re-challenge, they're maybe dropped to third in the market or fourth in the market, trying to challenge. Why is it that they need to kind of behave differently in media?
Well, I think to most people, we all have to start from the point of view that advertising is kind of looks like wallpaper. I don't know, I forget the number, but we're exposed to thousands of messages every day, and there's too much advertising that's really blah. And if you just become part of the wallpaper, a sea of sameness, and the brands just blur into each other, and they're easily forgotten and easily ignored. And I think that the one thing that we all need to remember is quite how fierce the competition for attention is. And I know the concept of attention as a metric is kind of widely talked about at the moment, but I think we really need to think about what that means, because in everyone's pocket is everything that's ever been made by anyone and everything that's ever being made, which is ever growing kind of cascade of information and content all the time. That's the bar. That's the competitive set, and we all need to wake up to that as an industry and think about what we're doing. So even if you are the biggest spender in the category, are you just contributing to that wallpaper, or have you got something more interesting to put in front of people? Because the competition is everything that anyone could be doing instead, and which is everything. So that puts you into a really different space, and no one is going to solve that problem by playing it safe. And what we talk to the brands we work with and say is that you won't beat your biggest spending competitors by spending less money in the same places, reaching the same people with the same thing. And we want to encourage brands to think differently about what they're saying, how they're saying it. But I guess our core area of responsibility is where they're saying it. Yeah,
it's really it's good, and there is so much sameness, isn't there? Like, it's just a lot out there. And it's kind of interesting how you're right, like stuff just kind of blends in and is invisible, right? I think we forget that. I think in this industry, and like we've talked about a lot on the podcast, is that we're so invested in what we're doing, particularly if you work client side. I think because you live and breathe it all the time.
Yeah, it's the biggest danger, isn't it? And there's a great Dave Trott quote. A great Dave Trott quote where he talks about research, and he says the best thing to do when you get a brief is to sit down and write about everything you know about the brand before you start reading anything, because it's the last point at which you're thinking like a normal human being. And I think that's really
that is important. So good. It is so good. Because it. I love that. I start thinking like a human being, because like we just don't. We get so into the importance, and it ends up in work, I think, that is kind of inside out. Do you know what I mean? Because even then we're like, we have to say all these things about us and what we're doing and how great we are, and it's like, no, nobody cares.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, inside out. Yeah, exactly that.
You've analysed 236, am I right with the number, 236 campaigns in the IPA database, to prove the relative advantage framework. Tell me about the relative advantage framework.
Okay, so the thing is, Connor, having worked at a few media agencies, I went to a media owner for The Guardian for 7 years, but media agencies tend to all have a planning process. And what I noticed at the media agencies I'd worked at was that they tended to be replaced quite quickly. Often, you'd have more than one a year, which kind of highlighted the fact that they weren't often that used by everyone in the agency, least of all the strategists who come up with them. And when I got to Bountiful Cow and we started talking about it, we realised that everyone had the same experience. So we thought, why don't we not have one? Why do we don't need a planning process as such, but we do want a kind of a principle that everyone in the agency can understand and use and buy into, which is easier said than done. But I wanted to get to something that everyone here, no matter what role they have, can apply to everything they do within the business. And to kind of enshrine our challenger spirit, we change the values of the agency as well. Now, every agency's got values, but they're usually things like, be brave, or be kind, or whatever, which are all well and good, but they tend to be shared by a lot of people. One thing I noticed when I got here is we have a lot of cow puns in everything, and some are more successful than others. I struggled to explain to my dad, for instance, why our weekly meeting is called Moo, but we thought there could be some values, challenger values we could have that would really enshrine that spirit in everything we do. So one is no bullshit. So we like to tell the truth to our clients, no matter how uncomfortable. And it's also about how we run our business, because we're sort of ultra transparent to a degree I've not seen in any other business, and which is great and helps me sleep at night. But it's also about how we how we deal with our clients, and how we try and address, kind of shake them out of that inside out thinking you talked about before. And the second value is no sacred cows, because we don't think there are any questions that you shouldn't ask. So we ask the questions that others might not want to. And the third is don't follow the herd, which is exactly what I talked about before. Let's find out what everyone else is doing, and then see what the opposite looks like. And it might not always be where you end up, but it's a pretty good place to start. So those were our values. And then we started to think about how can we kind of take the essence of those and put that into a principle which informs all of our work. And what we got to is relative advantage, which is so simple, but it's just like we find the clear spaces where our competitors have neglected or overlooked. And that's where we grow brands. So you can get excess share of voice if you're investing into a space where your customers are, which is effective, but where your competitors are not. That's it. And what we do is we look for that in media, so media spaces competitors aren't using, audiences they might not be reaching, times of day that aren't being used, or times of year, social currency, or thought leadership, or even distribution, finding places to sell products that aren't being used by the competitors.
Right. Brilliant example of that for me was when I was working at Indeed in the US. Their big competitor was ZipRecruiter. And Indeed had kind of avoided advertising in podcasts, so doing anything on any podcast platform, and they were all over it. They were all over it, investing incredibly heavily. I think it was like maybe the Bill Burr one, where like he was kind of almost taking the piss out of the name ZipRecruiter. Like it was just, but they let him do it, and they were stealing share. They were stealing share from Indeed, and became like a real, we need to wake up to this. But you're kind of then behind the game a little bit, right? And you're kind of, so what do you do? And really interesting. So it's just a kind of as you were talking there, you have, again, read this, that with brands that follow the relative advantage principles, where I love numbers, 61% more likely to see very large awareness growth, and 17% more likely to receive commitment from customers. Tell me a bit more about that. 70% more commitment from customers. Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, we did 236. We found 236 examples. Shall I sort of talk through a bit of the methodology, how we put it all together? So it was kind of a group effort within the agency. We started talking to Peter Field and Lawrence Green at the IPA, and they were really interested, because I don't think agencies aren't really working with them in this way to kind of use the data bank to prove a hypothesis. So they were very close to us on the methodology all the way through to make sure that it would kind of stand up. But
we wanted to find examples in the data bank of relative advantage, and important things. When we were looking at those examples, when we were going through the studies, we were blind to the results, so we were only choosing brands that kind of followed the principles. We then removed all the outliers, so we took both large brands and niche brands out, so that it was kind of in the mid market. Everything we did was all the examples we looked at were commercial for profit. I think 2/3 of them were operating in low growth, stagnant or declining categories. So we wanted to remove, the effect of an already successful category out of there. And what we found was that I guess it looks like a kind of classic funnel, that brands that use relative advantage were more likely to see awareness growth at the top, they're more likely to see consideration in the middle, and more likely to deliver results at the bottom. 15% of them were more likely to generate at least one very large brand effect, so that's things like awareness, differentiation, esteem and commitment. So bringing new people to the brand by its nature, that's what relative advantage does. But we think the reason it kind of improved things like commitment, because it would, by operating in a different space, you stand for something to the audience, and they're more likely to stick around as a result. We also saw that brands were 21% more likely to see two very large brand effects. So it was clearly having a big impact on brand effects, but also in business effects as well. So there was a 9% uplift in very large business effects like sales, acquisition and profit, and more likely than the control to show 4 or more very large business effects. So we were really pleased with that. I think we were really pleased with the and particularly the esteem and commitment results, because I guess when we were sort of trialing the concept, some clients could express a concern early on that there's a reason why everyone advertises in the same way, and there's a reason why stepping outside that could damage perceptions. But that's really not what we saw. We saw that using relative advantage doesn't do any damage at all, improves trust, but hugely improves esteem. So we think breaking the norms displays an air of confidence.
We'll be right back after these.
Today's show is brought to you by the Indie List CMO Collective. This service from the Indie List provides you with access to a curated range of highly experienced and talented senior marketing specialists. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
That's really interesting, because I agree with you. Like there surely is a belief that, well, of course we're on these platforms because our competitors are there. If we're not there, we're not seen to be as trusted as them, or trustworthy as them. That's really interesting finding, because like for any challenger brand, but like lots of brands are faced with budget constraints. We don't all have the money of the big brands, and so to understand that actually you can be in other places and still build esteem and trust is really powerful. To get to. You said you worked with Peter Field, and I know he said any brand with ambitions beyond its budgets needs to have a look at the 7 principles that you uncovered, which is high praise from the man himself. So do you want to can we talk through the 7 principles? Because I think they're kind of really useful, really interesting, and kind of almost actionable for anyone who's listening to this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the question you raised just a second ago about it doesn't have to be, you don't have to advertise in a different place. You can show up in a different way. I think for luxury brands, for example, the company you keep is so important, because actually that helps people understand your business in a context, right? So, but you can show up in by thinking about the thought leadership you display, or the kind of social currency. So the 7 ways to approach it are useful, because it's not always just about different media.
And that, so can I just ask about that? The company you keep. Do you mean neighborhood of brands, or okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, and especially if your brand's less established, it's important that you're able to show where you belong. And we did a bit of research back along when I was at The Guardian that showed that media placement was as important as creative for people understanding what a brand is and how it fits in. So from a consideration point of view, I think that's really important.
Definitely. Oh yeah, I remember again conversations before about that, where we're trying to convince people that a brand showing up in a place with other brands would just increase kind of the perceptions of the brand as kind of a grown-up, trusted brand. Anyway, let's get into your 7 principles. They're not yours, but
sure. So
Bountiful Cows.
They're definitely not ours, and I guess that's the point, isn't it? You know, that's why we want to use the IPA data bank, because we wanted to show examples beyond our four walls. So the first is audience. So if we think about an audience, there's the latest census showed like quite how much the UK population is changing, and that creates a huge amount of opportunity to understand diverse audiences, for example, and think about how we can better connect with those audiences and how they relate to your product or category. And Nationwide's a brand that's done some good work in that space, but it's an area I think we all need to improve in. Media channels, we've talked about a little bit, but that's really important. So one of the examples we saw in the research was that Wagamama using cinema in a category that hasn't used it, a kind of brand corporate level. But of course, we all remember going to the cinema when we were younger. Adverts for restaurants around the corner. So it felt like a bit of a circle closing there. But they used that to enormous effect and were able to demonstrate the effectiveness of doing it. And the third is day part. So just thinking about lots of brands tend to kind of flock together at certain points, particularly at peak. But then we saw Deliveroo as a really good example, who came to this sort of stunning insight, but so true. But outside London, people tend not to eat dinner at 9 p.m. People eat dinner a lot earlier, and they found none of their competitors were advertising in late afternoon or early evening. So again, we're able to kind of like own that space and to great effect. So, right, another example of relative advantage is seasonality. My favourite case study in this space was for Australian lamb. So lamb traditionally is a meat associated with spring. Australian lamb kind of pulled that forward where there's out of a competitive space and into January. After Christmas, not many meat brands were advertising, but there was a clear space around Australia Day. So they spent 10 years making lamb the focus or the kind of the official meat partner for Australia Day, and being on all those barbecues, and again kind of created their own space. And they did some really good work around that.
I saw the stuff this year. So good. It was the generational one, wasn't it? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
So
so it got to a point where they owned that moment so much they could sort of almost start talking about something else, and that's a 10-year project all the way through. So that's been really good. Thought leadership and social currency are other areas you can start to own. So Ella's Kitchen, for example, have positioned themselves as the expert on weaning. And then there's distribution. How do you find new ways to sell your product or new places to sell your product?
Amazing. I mean, there's so much in there, so many different kind of pieces of, just even taking one of those, I think you can start. Like I'm just thinking, someone listening to this today going, I can't do all 7. But like, even if you just think about one, like I'm based in Ireland. You talked about kind of the audience in the UK is changing. Again, same in Ireland, huge diversity. I mean, you look back Ireland 20 years, it was pretty the same, but there's been changes of kind of the demographic structure of Ireland, and it's brilliant. But actually, and I've done some work recently with a dairy brand, and we found there is like Irish kind of historical consumption of dairy is well known, right? Because it's part of kind of upbringing. But some of the newer audiences that we're communicating with, it's not part of kind of their background and their heritage and their story. So actually, how do you start thinking about them? Now, it's just a very interesting thing to start thinking about it. Okay, but that's then you kind of delve into those questions, right? So kind of, probably each one might lead you on to one of the other of the 7 principles.
Yeah, definitely. And and I think we've had we were pitching for a fast food brand back end of last year, and we're talking to we've got a guy from India in the team who was saying actually for him this brand represented it was more about the chicken products and the meat products that they the beef products that they do, because as part of his background, beef is not a huge so it's something that is often on the menu. So, and again, it makes you think about things in a completely different way. It can often get you to completely clear spaces.
It kind of goes then to the importance, I think, as well, of having within teams and within kind of whether it's marketing team or media agency or creative agency is kind of diversity of thinking, because without it we're all going to just kind of have the same thinking, right?
Yeah, I completely. I went to Bletchley Park about 10 years ago. It was really interesting. It was sponsored by Google, which I thought was kind of all well and good. I guess it's the sort of the forerunner of everything they do. But there was a note attached to it. It just talked about the kind of diversity of the team at Bletchley Park, because you had a lot of women who weren't contributing to the kind of physical war effort. A lot of shopkeepers. Obviously, Alan Turing himself was famously gay, but having lots of different brains focusing on a problem, they credit as being one of the things that enabled them to kind of crack the Enigma code, because they were thinking about it, approaching it in such different ways. And I think it's really important in the workplace that you have that. And diversity of thinking, diversity of opinion is very, very important as well. Monoculture is unlikely to get you to interesting places.
100%. Can I ask you a bit about the social currency one? I was quite kind of interested in and just exploring that a bit more, about you kind of doing things that get talked about kind of a different way to the rest of the category. And some of that probably is maybe down to the creative as well, or the communications piece. How closely are you working with communications creative agencies as part of this? Because to me it feels like the two have to work pretty strongly together, because, or I could be wrong.
No, you're definitely not wrong. I mean, it's one of the reasons I wanted to come and work here. When I was talking to Jenny Bigham, who's my boss, early on, she said that 2/3 of our new business recommendations come through creative agencies. When I was at network agencies, often you spend your time fighting creative agencies to like who had the best idea, So that was really refreshing to hear, and it's certainly what I've experienced. Having no client wants fighting agencies. Every client wants agencies to work together and come up with the best possible work. And equally, most people at creative agencies don't want to do vanilla work either. So it's really important. That said, I think we've been moving more into a full service space ourselves as an agency. So part of my goal for Bountiful Cow, my sort of grand ostentatious 3-year plan, which we're 2.4 years into, was to diversify the business so that we could deliver creative. And we're launching today. Actually, we're launching our first TV ad for Well Soon, which is a brand we created from scratch for a company called Practice Plus Group, which is amazing. So with help from the team at Supernova, the 7 Stars, to do that. And we've also launched a brand consultancy business called BC Squared, which has become a major part of our revenue mix as well. So we absolutely think it's incredibly important. And I think we have to think that most, if you think about when you try and explain to people in the real world that you work at a media agency, they don't know what it is. And people don't see media and advertising; they see it together. So you have to think about it in that context. Someone said to me the role of media. You could describe it as if I sent a text message to my mum saying "Happy birthday, Mum." She'd probably be really pissed off. But if I send the same message attached to some flowers and some chocolates, she'll be really pleased. And I think that kind of encapsulates the whole thing.
That's brilliant. I think it was Rory Sutherland has said that kind of the worst thing that ever happened in Adland was the breaking up of media and creative, because they used to be together, and it kind of. It got broken up, and you can see the advantages of it.
So I think I agree with Rory to an extent, but I also think there's a real a brilliant functional relationship between a creative agency and a media agency is a brilliant thing. Going back to the point about diversity of thinking, you don't want groupthink, and that's really important. So that creative tension can be an incredibly healthy thing, and we love working with our creative partners. We learn from them, and it's when it's at its best, it's an inspiring thing. But for some clients, it makes sense for for it to be much closer together and to be able to execute the same idea, so it's really coherent all the way through. So we're lucky enough to be blessed with some really brilliant creative talent within our business. So I mentioned the Supernova team at 7 Stars, and we've got Matt Buttrick, who's a kind of creative strategist working in Bountiful Cow. So we've got the kind of chops to do it. So it's not been a difficult transition. We've got 3 creative clients already now, and we're producing work that we're proud of.
That's great. And are there others kind of like, it's because again, it's quite like, again, the space of the kind of the challenger brand thinking is interesting. And are there others like in the US? Are there other agencies doing this, or are you kind of, is the 10-year plan global expansion?
Well, of course, yeah, Bountiful Cow conglomerate. Obviously, mentioned BBH. And we were lucky enough to have them join us at our event in the IPA to talk about what they do. And it's, of course, there are similarities, and there's we admire the work they do. We just want to kind of plough headlong into our 7 spaces and take that principle forward. So we're kind of, I guess what we wanted to do without wanting to sound too grand about it was to obviously it's for us, it's our business, but to sort of like put a flag in the ground for being different, because we think it's the challenge that every single brand faces. If you boil them all down, and you can talk about data and you can talk about business growth, but fundamentally the challenge we all face is of being ignored. And if your brand is ignored, it will fall between the cracks, and that's in the competition for attention is the thing that we all need to focus on. So I think that as far as brands and businesses and agencies alike all need to think about how to address that challenge and how we can stand out.
Yeah, look, as you said, there's so much work done on kind of the attention economy, and I've had Karen, on the podcast talking about it, and it's I think it's just an important thing to think about, is fleeting attention and how people consume the media, because TikTok for me is it's a bizarre one. I started putting stuff up on TikTok. I'll be honest, I kind of stopped because oh my god, people are watching about 2 seconds. They're I'm just no, I'm gonna leave.
Well, that's enough to be counted as a view in some circles. Yeah.
It's a completed view. Yeah. Look, I'd love to talk about a little bit about some of the work that you have done, but things that you've kind of done that you've really been proud of, maybe taken bigger bets and but really, really paid off for Bountiful Cow and their clients.
Yeah, definitely. I think, one of the clients we work with is called Newman, and we who are a brand. They're basically in the men's healthcare space, but predominantly focused on erectile dysfunction. And they've got a brilliant in-house creative team run by a guy called Paul Coleman, who's brilliant. And that category is kind of characterised by real stereotypes. You can picture the ads now of erectile dysfunction as if men sat on the end of beds with their partner's consoling hand on their shoulders, and they're looking at the floor. And in that space, Newman produced some ads which basically were just euphemism for penis. Okay. And they were, there was an ad with a chicken that just said cock, get yours fixed at Newman. There was an advert with a sausage that said wiener, get yours fixed. And we took the wiener ad and put it on 96 sheets in Westfield. And this is a category that's historically used, bus advertising or tube car panel advertising. It's it's small, it's discreet, it's almost embarrassed as the thing is. And we just thought, no, let's blow it up and put it into high profile spaces. So that's been a great brand to work with. We work with La Familia Rana, who are a fresh filled pasta company who are just going on this amazing growth journey at the moment. We're proud to be partnering with them on that. But the first meeting we had with them, it was that category has been so entrenched in kind of tropes and media behaviours. It's all advertising in food magazines, and all the ads for Italian pastas are all the same. They look like images of nonnas and trattorias, and and it kind of felt that it wasn't really keeping pace with this sort of really vibrant, exciting food culture that we have nowadays in the UK and beyond. And we kind of went to them and just said, well, modern food culture happens not in magazines, it happens in TikTok, and it's not in restaurants, it's in street food, and it's not recipes, it's tutorials. And so we kind of accelerated their kind of media body language into those new spaces. And we took them away from advertising at weekends around supermarkets to midweek in commuter areas, because it's all about picking something up on the way home, but making sure we had something really fresh and vibrant and interesting to put in front of them. So we partnered with Mob Kitchen to create kind of 10-minute miracle recipes, so stuff that people could replicate really, really, really quickly and easily at home, but was characterized by kind of really brightly lit food photography that kind of was a world away from that M&S food porn, dark imagery you used to get 10, 15 years ago, to something that looks colourful, fresh and vibrant, and more in keeping with the now. And then the big leap, I think, it was we kind of we talked a lot about street food culture, so we created them a street food van, and we took that out on tour, and actually used that as a sampling opportunity, and took it out to spinning fields in Manchester and Granary Square in King's Cross, so that we could actually be part of that world. And it's the body language of the brand has completely changed, and they're on a really exciting journey with distribution in Tesco now. So, and we're in a great
That's
place.
amazing, and it's great just from the way you're talking there as well. It sounds like you're incredibly close to the business results that are coming out of the work that you're doing, which I think it can sometimes be a gap where the client or the brand doesn't necessarily share that with the agency.
Yeah, going back, I remember I was talking to someone about this yesterday, but about 20 years ago, I was sat with my boss Paul at the time, and we first started hearing about econometrics and measurement, because before that we didn't really know, right? And we looked at each other and I said, "Oh, help! The house of cards is going to come tumbling down now."
Maybe time for neighbours now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no one's going to believe us. But it's been a phenomenal thing, because it's great to show the value of your ideas to clients' business, and if you get it right. And I think we're coming here, one of the things I've first noticed were there were WhatsApp groups dedicated to celebrating clients' business results and keeping an eye on them. And I think that's incredibly important, because you don't want to feel that you're delivering something peripheral or ephemeral. Media is a crucial ingredient to the success of our clients' business. I joked about MediaVest, but media is an investment, and it makes a big difference. And to be able to show that, and to be able to kind of restate the value of building a trajectory towards growth, and helping clients put measurement frameworks in place where we're all clear on what the milestones are that unlock greater investment, is an incredibly important part of it. And then we're very proud to grow alongside the business.
Yeah, and you're right, that point about it unlocks investment, and it kind of helps everybody along the way, right? It helps the client put the value, because again, clients are having those conversations all the time, so everyone kind of working together will just provide the data. And look, it's not kind of, as one of my old bosses said, kind of marketing. It's actually the truth as well. You have to know what's going wrong as well to be able to kind of course correct and fix. And I guess then it helps with kind of more long-term sustainable relationships with clients, which is what every agency wants. And I think clients really ultimately want as well, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think going into that the kind of measurement space with the kind of no bullshit attitude, which we do have, is important, because you can't just go in there and claim everything was a success, because it isn't, and it's about what you can learn from and take forward. And we're so lucky because we're backed by an incredible effectiveness team led by Billy Ryan, who's part of ARC at the 7 Stars. He give us this incredible capability to almost answer any question with confidence and alacrity. So yeah, it's I would say it's coming back from media agencies after 7 years at Media Owner. It's the area I've seen the most development.
Brilliant. Listen, Adam, thanks a million. I found the results and kind of the outcomes of what you did fascinating. Not an easy task, kind of going through all that work either. Those case studies, and incredible to have those insights. And look, I think from challenger brand and non-challenger brand, there's 7 principles that I think anybody can look at and think about. And as I said earlier, it's probably start with one, and then it'll lead you to the others. Would be my thoughts on it. So thanks a million for joining me today, and That's What I Call Marketing. It was a real treat chatting to you, and thoroughly enjoyed your sliding doors moment post Glastonbury. Thank
you, Connor.
Well, that wraps up a truly insightful conversation with Adam. From sharing his unique journey into the world of media, starting at that spur of a moment decision at a train station post Glastonbury, I love that story, to delving deep into the approach to challenger brands and the importance of embracing innovative strategies in media. Adam has definitely given us a lot to think about. The 7 principles laid out provide a guide for brands to navigate the complexities of today's advertising landscape with creativity and purpose. A huge thanks to Adam for joining That's What I Call Marketing and for sharing such invaluable advice. I hope this episode inspires you to think differently and challenge norms. If you enjoyed it, please do rate, review, and of course share it with your peers, your colleagues, your friends, your family even, and let them know about That's What I Call Marketing. Be sure to tune in for new episodes every Tuesday, and of course check out the archive on that'swhatIcallmarketing.com. All of our previous episodes are there, right from the very first one with John Goldstone just over 2 years ago. Some amazing episodes in the archive. So until the next episode, from me, your host, Conor Byrne, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks to the Indie List for sponsoring today's show. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency